Hey everybody, this is Matt with mathsmath.com. Thanks for joining us here today as we check out rewriting equations. How can we take an equation, switch it around, and it still be the same equation? Well, that's what we're going to be able to answer today. We're in the Common Core Math Standard of Expressions and Equations, and we're going to be using math properties to create equivalent expressions today. We're going to be answering this question of how we can rewrite equations and formulas to solve for a variable that are really the same equation or expression. All right, you'll be able to answer that by the end of the lesson today. So let's move into it. Let's think about making money today. If you ever thought about it, making money is really a math equation. Your profits are really your revenue, how much you bring in, minus your costs, right? Your profit equals your revenue minus your cost. Well, what if you wanted to solve for your cost or your revenue? You want to know how much your revenue was. Well, you could move some variables around and you could say, hey, your revenue equals your cost plus your profit, right? That's just basic definition. So that's what we're going to be looking at today is how can you take an equation like the profit equation or the revenue equation and move the variables around. Okay? When we're given a formula, you just have to really realize that everything is movable. Everything can be moved. Imagine if we did have this revenue and profit. What happens if you have the revenue and the profit but not the cost? But this is the equation. Profit equals revenue minus cost, right? PRC. What if you had the revenue and the profit but not the cost, and you didn't want to continually solve for that every single time? Well, you know what? We can move some of these things away from the C. How do we change everything in the equation to equal to C, not equal to P? Well, again, if you just see it, each of those letters can be moved. You're not going to have a real hard time. So when we say we're going to solve for something, that means move everything away from that variable so it's only one variable on that side. It's not like 3x or 4x or 0.5x. It's just one single x equals everything else. That's what we're going to be doing today, okay? All right. So let's solve for C. Let's do that. We have P equals R minus C. We want to get everything away from C. Again, that's what solve for means, so let's do it. Well, first we're going to subtract R, right? Well, R minus R, that's super easy. That's just the same number minus the same number. That's 0. But P minus R, what on earth is that? Well, we don't know. So you know what we do? We just write P minus R. Pretty easy, huh? Because you don't know either one of the variables, you just leave it like it is. Now don't forget you got to leave that minus in there with the C and it becomes negative, okay? That sticks with it. It doesn't go away. So now we have negative C equals P minus R. Well, I don't want negative C. I want positive C. So make everything positive. Really, you're just multiplying it by -1 or flipping the signs. So that means this becomes positive, that becomes positive, and that becomes negative. So your answer, by flipping every sign, is this. That negative P plus R equals C, or the C equals R minus P equation. I prefer this one, if you know what I mean. All right? Why don't you solve for R now? Using those same tricks and techniques, solve for R. Get rid of everything away from the R. That one's a lot easier, isn't it? If you think about it, you're subtracting C. How do you get rid of subtracting C? Add C to the other side, and that's it. It's just P plus C equals R. Okay, getting the hang of it? Remember, all you're doing is moving things around. Well, what if I had the distance rate time equation, where rate equals distance divided by time? What if I wanted to solve for D? How do I get everything away from D? How do I solve for D? That's our question. So let's do that. Let's solve for D now, okay? I have rate equals distance divided by time. Now, we're dividing by time, so how do you get rid of dividing by time? Multiply by time on both sides, and that's it. So the dividing by t, multiplying by t goes away. The t's cancel, and now we get that d equals r times t, or rt equals d, or d equals rt, the dirt equation. All right, would you now solve for t? This one's tricky. you think about cross multiplying and dividing, you're setting up a proportion here. The t's on bottom, you can flip the r and the t around, and that's it. Here it is. T equals d divided by r. Time equals the distance divided by the rate. And that's it. All right. Solve for the red variable here. Notice this is the area formula for a triangle, and this is the perimeter for a rectangle. Solve for h and solve for L. Get everything away. Move that half, move that b, move the 2w, and move the 2. You can get everything away from the red letter. Well, if you've got a half here, don't forget to get rid of a half, you can multiply by 2. And don't forget, you got to go in a certain order here as well. If you move the 2w over, that's minus 2w, and then you've got a 2 left over, so you can divide by 2. Well, here's a couple different ways that you can look at it. Here they are. How'd you do? Have any trouble? We'll definitely go back if you need any help with anything else. That's pretty much it for today. Were you able to solve for those red variables? Those are going to be definitely your trickiest ones when the equations get longer and harder like that. Okay, so as long as you can figure out how to move any of these numbers, you're good to go. Everything is movable in the equation. Okay, with the variable you want, you just move everything else around it. So if you're adding a variable, you subtract it to both sides. If you're subtracting a variable, you add it to both sides. If you're dividing by a variable, you multiply it. Multiplying by a variable, you divide it. No big deal, huh? Everything is movable in the equation. So let's do these. Let's solve for y. Let's work on this first one together. Now, SADMAP and PEMDAS still come into play here. I want to move the x first before dividing by 2. So if I move the x first, I'm going to subtract x, subtract x. Now I get 2y equals 4 minus x. Now there's a couple different ways we can do this. We're multiplying by 2. I don't want 2 y's, I just want 1 y. How do you multiply by, or get rid of multiplying by 2? You divide by 2. Divide this guy by 2 and that guy by 2. You got to divide them both by 2. So y equals 2 minus 1/2 x. And bam, that's it. Now, trick here with this guy is you're multiplying by negative 1/3. How do you get rid of multiplying by negative 1/3? Well, divide by negative 1/3 or multiply by negative 3 and it'll go away. Same thing with this guy down here. You got 4/5. Well, how do you get rid of 4/5? Multiply by 5/4. Multiply by the reciprocal. Flip them up and down. And then here, it's a pretty long one. You want to combine all the variables first, combine the y's together, combine the x's together, and then you'd be good to go. All right. Quick way to get through it. Here's the rest of your answers here. How'd you do? Have any troubles? Definitely look at the reciprocals and multiplying by the opposites. See if that helps you. But that's pretty much it for today. Can you answer this question of how we can rewrite equations and formulas to solve for a variable? I bet you can. Pretty simple as long as you know how to move everything around an equation. That's all you're doing. Well, that's it. As we talked about money today, rewriting equations. Thanks for watching. This is Matt with mathsmath.com. Check us out on Facebook at Solving Maths Problems or on Twitter at Maths Math. And enjoy math and making money.